When Chinh Pham was 10 years old, he and his family, like thousands of others, fled the chaotic capital of what was then South Vietnam on the final day of the Vietnam War. They were rescued by the 7th Fleet of the U.S. Navy and eventually landed in the United States, where they began a new life. Today, Chinh is a successful intellectual property lawyer in a large international law firm and is at the midpoint of his one-year term as president of the Boston Bar Association, the first Asian American ever to serve in that position. In this episode of Higher Callings, I spoke with Chinh about his decision to become a lawyer, his leadership positions in a number of nonprofits, his commitment to mentoring young professionals, and his leadership roles with the Boston Bar Association. We began our conversation with Chinh recounting his family's rescue from the South China Sea, and that portion of Ching's interview will be published in a later episode of this podcast. The conversation you are about to hear focuses on Ching's adult years, beginning with his decision to attend law school at UC San Francisco after graduating from Berkeley years after his family's arrival in the United States.
What we're hearing from a lot of the young lawyers is that they need the opportunity to be exposed to programs on business development, on networking, on all the soft skills, right, that's necessary to be successful. Because law school didn't teach them that. And I don't think law firms, they're doing that either as much. There may be some business development program in place here and there, but I think that there aren't too many opportunities like that. So I think that BBA recognizes that, and I want to make sure that we create a welcoming environment for a lot of these young lawyers, whether they're diverse candidates or not. I want them to look at BBA as an organization where they can reach out to, that they can utilize resource, they can get involved with, and be successful in whatever way that they envision their career to be.
I'm Don Frederico, and this is Higher Callings.
Part of the reason I went to law school was, I was doing research, biotech research after college, and just sitting next to some of these PhDs and hearing them just lamenting the fact that they spent so much time getting an education and now working really for peanuts, right? Yeah. and then on top of that, for whatever reason, the lawyers that represented the various companies that I was working at, they would reach out to me and just said, "Ching, you need to go to law school."
What was your degree in? What was your undergraduate degree in, and what kind of work were you doing at that point?
Yeah, so my degree was in genetics, and
Okay.
I was doing a lot of biotech research focusing on plants. So, it's very controversial what I did, right? I was basically looking to create a process to introduce foreign DNA into plants so that plants can have these new different characteristics, whether it's frost resistance or whatnot. So that was my job.
Yeah.
Right? So I did that, but my wife couldn't imagine me doing that, sitting in front of a microscope, dissecting these little plants for like 8 hours a day, and saying, "There's no way you're going to be able to do that for the rest of your career." And so, long story short, I looked into a PhD program in immunology, and then after that, I said, "I'm going to law school."
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I ended up looking at an IP program at the University of San Francisco. At the time, neither Berkeley nor Stanford had a program in IP. If you can imagine, you're in the Bay Area, and neither of the big two schools had a program in IP.
Yeah, and just in case anybody listening to this doesn't know what IP stands for, I think most people will, but it's intellectual property.
Yes, and
so patents, trademarks, all of that sort of thing.
Copyright and whatnot. And the professor at the University of San Francisco, Thomas McCarthy, had a program there, and he said, "Jay, why don't you come over and check out my program?" He's written a lot of treatises, in the trademark space. So I went over there, checked out the program, and ended up going to USF.
Good.
It's the best thing that I did.
Good. Well, what brought you to the East Coast?
Oh, yes. I lost a bet.
With your wife, as I
With my
recall.
wife, yes.
Yeah.
So I was in my third year of law school, and she was in Boston doing a 1 year MBA program, and we had an agreement that whomever gets a job offer first will determine where we live. And I had at the time had been working, as a law clerk at a law firm in San Francisco for 2 years, right? And I had a pretty good sense that I would probably get an offer there, but my wife ended up getting an offer first. And 2 weeks later, the hiring partner came up to me and said, "Ching, here's your offer." And I just looked at him and I shook my head, saying, "You should have just given me this 2 weeks earlier." And so, so I honored the agreement, and then we moved to Boston.
I'm not
And
sure how many of our listeners will feel about you saying you ended up in Boston because you lost a bet. But I suppose you had a pretty good experience in Boston once you arrived here, right?
yes, I did. And what was I guess daunting at the time was this was in 1993, right? I think the
Okay.
country was in a recession.
Yeah.
And the feedback that I received from many people was that the fact that I didn't know anyone in Boston, that I had no connection in Boston, it would likely take me about 18 months to get a job, right? But obviously, I wasn't gonna let that happen. So I got here, and what I did was I knew I had to keep my resume active. Um, and so called up a few small law firms,
Yeah.
IP, intellectual property law firms, out in the suburbs, and just letting them know that I'm looking for a job. I don't have any connection here, but I want to keep my resume active and I want to volunteer my time, just so that I can say I'm working for somebody.
Sure.
So one of those firms said, "Sure, go ahead. We'll work with you on that." And then within, like, 3 or 4 months, I was able to secure a job with at the time, Bromberg Sunstein. So yeah, just being a little bit creative was, I was able to secure a job at a time when I thought, the economy wasn't doing so great. So
That was really clever of you. I don't think most people would think of doing that, but at least your wife was earning a living while you were.
yes, she was able to support me.
Yeah.
I think if we weren't, if she wasn't, getting paid, I don't think I would have been able to do what I did.
So you ended up that began your trajectory to become an IP lawyer in the Boston area. You were always with Boston-based law firms or
Mhm.
Boston offices of national firms like Greenberg Traurig, where you are now. Um, and you've done very well for yourself. I think you've established a very good reputation, and you've had a very successful practice doing IP work. What specific kind of IP work do you do, Ching?
So I work with a lot of technology companies, and um, it's really, I would say, technology agnostic, right? So I have clients that span the spectrum of technology, from life sciences to materials to software, to AI and whatnot. You name it, I probably have a client in that space. And what I do, other than the traditional patent or IP related work, what I think my clients value the most is my ability to facilitate opportunities for them, trying to understand what their business objectives, are, and then understanding that IP is just a tool to help them, obtain, achieve whatever objectives
Yeah.
they had. And so, understanding that and able to kind of position their innovation program, protecting their innovation program in such a way so that they can use their IP portfolio to exploit whatever opportunities that might be available for them. So I think that's what I do, well, and that's what a lot of my clients appreciate.
And you've been
And so,
doing that for how long now?
so I've been practicing law for almost 30 years now,
Okay.
and I've been at GT for, close to 20 years. And
Yeah.
so it's been a while.
You co-chair the IP practice of the Boston office of Greenberg Traurig, right?
I do, and in addition to that, I co-chair the firm's emerging technology, venture capital and emerging technology practice. It was maybe about 10 years ago. It was an area where we didn't have any designated practice group, and I don't know if you remember, Don, but it was at the one of the shareholders retreat, and I just said to the marketing group, "Let me have a booth. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to announce that I'm starting an emerging tech practice," and that's how it started. People came by and said, "Okay, I want to be part of this."
That's how you start things. You just decide you're going to do it, and you
Yeah,
tell
and
people
do
about
it.
it, and then it takes off. So
Yeah,
I wish it were always that easy, right? So
yeah. No,
Ching,
no. It's
what I want to talk with you about now, this is the purpose of this podcast is really to shine a light on people that do something extra. Not just making a good living as you do through excellent work, but also volunteer their time, or perhaps through their full time careers, are giving back to their communities, giving back to any number of groups of people. Sometimes it could be young people, it could be any group. You do that. You've been involved in a number of nonprofits, and I think we should at least mention most of them. And as I mentioned, I think at the beginning of the podcast, you're currently the president of the Boston Bar Association, which doesn't just happen overnight. I mean, you've been working with various committees. You've been an officer of the Boston Bar Association, kind of working up the ranks. You've been on the BBA Council, which is the governing body of the Boston Bar Association. All of that takes years and years and years, and it takes a fair amount of time. So I guess before I ask you to kind of walk us through some of those activities that you've been engaged in, why don't I start with sort of the basic question I ask everybody on the podcast? Why do you do it? Why, you could easily be just working and then going home to your family and your community and enjoying your life, but you also dedicate a lot of time to all these other things. Why do you do that?
yeah, and not just with the BBA, right? And as you
Right.
mentioned, I'm pretty involved with a number of different organizations, and I think that for me, um, to the extent that an organization has a mission that aligns with my belief
Yeah.
or my yeah, um, I I will get involved, right? And when I do, I'm usually pretty passionate about it. And there's a lot of pride in being involved with certain organizations for me. And part of that is I think it's an opportunity for me to give back to the community, right? It's really a form of civil engagement as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have help from a lot of people along the way. I didn't get here just doing things on my own, right? And I think that having an opportunity to give back in some capacity is important to me. And so maybe I can talk briefly about my involvement with some of the other organizations
Sure.
before we talk about the Boston Bar
Yeah,
Association.
absolutely. Go ahead.
There are a couple of organizations that I would say I'm very passionate about, and one of those is the Boston Museum of Science,
Hmm.
um, where I'm currently on the board of trustees. And just by way of background, I started training for the 2009 Boston Marathon, and I reached out to the museum, um, which had its inaugural marathon team in 2009, because I wanted to run as a charity runner, right? So fortunately, I got on to the team, and I started raising money for their traveling program, which is a program where they're taking science from the museum to the various communities throughout New England, and it's been a very successful program. And
What does
and
that mean, taking science to the
so they put
communities?
everything, they take a lot of the experiments, a lot of the fun stuff, right? Put it in a van and then driving that out to a particular community. In particular communities that perhaps may not have the opportunity to send a lot of their young students or their citizens to Boston to go to and to visit the museum. So
Yeah.
so we take the science out to the various community and put on a show essentially. So
Kind of a road show of the
yeah,
museum.
exactly. The museum marathon team was raising money, still is raising money for the traveling programs there. And so once I started raising money for the museum, eventually, they felt that I could contribute, in some capacity, so they invited me to join the board of overseers at the time,
Yeah.
right? And the museum, I would say, speaking of its mission, the vision of the museum, which I really like, which is a world where science belongs to each of us, for the good of all of us, and the mission is to inspire a lifelong love of science in everyone. That
Okay.
that really resonated with me because of my
That's what
work in the
attracted you to
science.
it?
Yeah, exactly. Once I was on the board of overseers there, I just kind of joined all the various committees, committees that I felt would allow me to kind of help in a way that I felt would best fit what I can help with, and I made it up to chairing the board of overseers a few years after that.
Right.
And during my tenure as a chair of the board of overseers, and then you can imagine the term overseers has a lot of negative connotation,
Yeah.
right? And so during my tenure there, we decided to change the name
Oh, what is it
of
now?
it's the board of museum advisors. And so
Good.
we went through, we did a little study, got feedback, and then got it approved. So it's now the board of museum advisors.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, right? To If you have a committee and then you're doing work for the community, we need to have a name that somehow resonates to the folks that we work with, and not create any sort of issues that perhaps the word overseers may present.
I
So
think there's a lot of work going on throughout the country to look
yeah,
at our vocabulary. I just wrote a piece about this I have a Substack newsletter called Reflections of a Boston Lawyer that I write every week. And just 2 weeks ago, I wrote a word about words, I called it. And it was exactly that type of issue. And, some people react very negatively to that, like it's cancel culture.
yeah,
But really what you're doing is you're just trying to find the right language that is inclusive for everyone.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I think that's a lot of the work that the museum is doing, because science sometimes is not that inclusive, right? And trying to
Yeah.
find ways to be as inclusive as you can, and be as accommodating as you can, within the community. I think it's important work, and so that something that I'm very passionate about,
Okay.
as well as many of my co-board members.
And then you obviously did well enough in that role that they asked you to join the board of trustees, which
Yes,
is
I
what you're
so
still
once
doing today.
I am, and I don't just join an organization just to say I'm a member, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very active. I'm on committees, I'm leading committees, so on and so forth. And so I'm very active with the museum. But I did say to them that this one year, while I am involved heavily with the Boston Bar, I'm going to
Right.
take a step back. They'll get
Yeah.
me back next year,
I'm
but
sure
but
they understand.
yeah. And then in addition to the museum, another organization where I'm pretty passionate about is the Vietnamese bar, right?
Yeah.
I just recently rotated off as the president of the National Vietnamese Bar. This is a bar that was formed about maybe 12, 13 years ago.
Right.
Really, once I recognize that there's a critical mass of Vietnamese attorneys. Law is not a traditional path for a lot of Vietnamese. It's engineering or medicine, right?
Okay.
And so once I got involved with the Vietnamese bar there, what I found interesting was there was just a lot of younger attorneys who just really needed guidance, because to navigate the law firm environment, and just really how to be successful, right? And so what I did was I created an infrastructure and a lot of different committees where we would be able to address a lot of different interests within the membership, and that is still being that's still in place today. So I'm really proud of what I did there.
You were
The
president.
short,
You were president of the organization, right?
yeah, I was, yes, yes.
And how many members does it have? How big an organization is this?
We have probably, unofficially, right? Because it's probably close to 2,500 members
This is
nationally.
nationally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
nationally. So it's a pretty decent size, ratio wise, with respect to the number of Vietnamese, in the U.S. there. So in addition to a couple of these nonprofits, what I also do is I work with a lot of these academic or private incubators or accelerator programs, and so and this is really more focused towards the work that I do because there's an ecosystem that needs a lot of support, and a lot of our young folks are now looking at the startup community as an option for a career, right? And they just need a lot of support for that. So I work with incubators like Harvard's iLab or Innovation Lab. I work with Northwestern University's The Garage, Northeastern University Idea, Mass Challenge, Columbia Business School, to basically advise and mentor a lot of these student ventures,
Wow.
to help set them up for success. And I've been doing that for a better part of like over a decade or more now. And a lot of these ventures now either become my clients or they're referring work to me because of the work that I do. But I didn't do that for that purpose, right? But it's really to help these young professionals be successful because I could see it in my kids, right? That's the path that most of these young professionals are now taking. They're no longer looking to work their entire career for an organization, but they want to do work on their own. They want to have something that's impactful. They want to do something that has some social impact as well. And being in control of their career by starting doing a startup or whatnot, that gives them a lot of flexibility.
Sure.
And then that's and then I was also involved with the Asian American Lawyer Association of Massachusetts
Yeah.
early in my career when I first moved to Boston, right? I became an officer, I was on the board. And really that being involved with the Asian American Lawyer Association of Massachusetts was really what started my path to to being involved with a lot of these nonprofits,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
and so that's a brief history of my various involvements, and it's
It sounds like it's a lot of it has been really rewarding work to do, but at the same time takes a lot of time.
it does, and then I don't mind actually. In addition to all that volunteer work, I also work with just informally mentoring a lot of the law students and,
Yeah.
and young lawyers in and around Boston, and as well as nationally as well. Yeah, in fact, I was just on the phone before I got on this call, kind of walking through a few strategies for a senior associate at another law firm
Yeah.
and trying to figure out how to navigate law firm politics, right? So,
I remember those days. Well, let me ask you this: is the mentoring you're doing, is it targeted at members of the Asian community, or is it broader than that?
no, it's actually broader than that. I do, there are a lot of Asian either law students or associates who reach out to me, but because of my involvement with BBA, a lot of students in particular. There's also young attorneys as well from all different, whether it's affinity groups or in the majority. I work with them, whether it's on their resume, their interviewing skills, how to best sell themselves or pitch themselves, I should say, and skills that's needed across the board, regardless of who you are, right? And so I actually have a meeting with someone who I met through the Boston Bar,
Okay.
next week, and just going to be working with the person on their resume and interviewing skills.
But you're doing this just because people approach you. They know
Yes,
you're
yes.
approachable. It's not that you're going through any kind of organized structure or anything to mentor
Yeah, no, this
people.
this is just
Okay.
because I enjoy it. I keep telling myself, right? I wish I had someone like me when
Yeah.
I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, right? Once it's important to pay it forward as well. So,
Good. Good for you.
yeah.
Well, let's turn to the Boston Bar Association, and how you got started in that.
Yes. So I have to think back, right? I was a member for many years, and then I think I was nominated by I want to say Tim Murphy at Sunstein right now, but I don't know if
Okay.
he's gonna acknowledge that. But I was nominated to be the co-chair of the um, International IP Committee of the International Law section at the time, and my co-chair is Jerry Cohen over
Oh,
at Burns Levinson, right?
well-known Boston IP
Yes, and
litigator, I think.
yes,
Yeah.
does a lot of IP work also, right?
Yep.
And so he and I co-chair that committee, and I think it was a 2-year appointment. And then once I was done, I was thinking, okay, I'm done. But then I got the invitation to join the education committee. This is a committee that has been sunsetted, unfortunately. But
Okay.
at the time, we kind of oversaw the continuing legal education aspect and really try to encourage a lot of different sections and committee to put on these CLE programs to really educate the membership. Right? And so that was something, the committee was very active, but I think it ran its course, and so and then once I rotated off the education committee, I'm thinking I was done, right? I thought I'm done. Then
No,
then
no,
then
no.
then I got invited to join the council.
Yeah. Well, let me pause there for a second,
Yeah.
because now that we're talking about the education programming, I think there's a unique quality to that in the Boston Bar Association, because, as you and I both know, Massachusetts is one of the only states in the country, if not the only one, that doesn't mandate continuing legal education as a condition of being a member of the bar. And so, on the one hand, there's no compelling need to have all these educational programs, because nobody needs them in order to get their ticket punched every year.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the BBA has a tradition of putting on a lot
Yes.
of excellent educational programs, and the lawyers come, even though they aren't required to, and it creates a pretty good reason why you don't need to mandate CLE in Massachusetts. At least that's the argument. I
Yeah.
think other bar associations may have a differing view on that, but the BBA has just been tremendously successful in their educational programming. So it's good to know you were part of that. Back when they had an education committee. I don't know what happened to it or where that's coming from now, but they're still putting on great programs.
Yeah. No, but I agree with you, right? I mean, if we're all humans, right? And so if we're forced to do something, we tend not to do it. And so I think the approach that the state of Massachusetts has, and then with BBA recognizing that there's a lot of resource available within its membership
Yeah.
for a lot of good content. I think that's just a great marriage there to create a lot of compelling and great and good programs that really, I think, energize the community. And
Yeah.
so I don't think I can see BBA ever failing at putting
Oh, I
on
agree.
great programs, right?
Yeah, I
So
agree. It's a great organization that is very dedicated to continuing legal education, but they also benefit from the fact that there's just a lot of terrific attorneys in the Boston
yeah,
area uh, who serve on panels, who organize these programs, who moderate the panels. So there's no shortage of talent, and the BBA can take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why BBA is so successful is that the staff, a good part of the leadership,
Yeah.
were able to identify, right, from the membership, individuals who have a lot of potential, and we cultivate those individuals and
Yeah.
work with them to basically create a pipeline that hopefully will continue the success of the organization, well into the future.
Yeah. Good. Well, so after that stint, they asked you, somebody nominated you. It is an election, after all, um,
Yes.
for most people, to serve on the BBA Council, which is the governing board of the Boston Bar Association. So, did you have to think long and hard about whether you wanted to do that, or was it just an easy decision?
It didn't take long, right? Because the year that I was asked to join, or I was voted on, I
Yeah.
was elected to join the council. Um, really was the year that Julia Houston was the president, and Julia and I actually started. Yeah, we both started at Brombergs and Sunstein within like maybe a week of one another.
Yeah.
And so I've known Julia for quite a while,
Yeah.
and so
And
you
she's an
know,
IP. She was. I don't think she's
yes,
practicing right now, but she was an
yes,
IP litigator as well.
she was a fantastic, um, you know, trademark attorney,
Hmm.
and had a very successful practice as well.
And
Uh,
became president of the Boston Bar Association
yes, yes.
a few
So
years ahead of you.
yeah, no, and so it was easy, for
Yeah.
me, hey, I get to work with Julia again.
Yeah.
So and then from there, I was asked to join the executive committee, and then was moved on to the leadership ladder. Um, I did though, I became the secretary for 1 year, and then because my involvement with let's say the Museum of Science and there are other obligations, I did step down for 1 year,
Yeah.
but then I came back the following
And you
year.
became treasurer at that point.
Yeah,
You
yes,
have served in every office of the BBA. So secretary, treasurer, and then the ladder that you mentioned begins with vice president,
president. Yeah,
president elect, and president. So that's a
yes,
3-year ladder.
yes, and so it's a, as you said at the beginning of the conversation, it's a long process. Right? I was trying to remember, when was I on that first committee, or was co-chair of that international IP law committee. It was
I
probably
have your
more than
resume
15
right
years
here.
ago.
You want me to tell you? Is
Oh,
it on your
you do?
resume? Yeah, I do. I have your resume. Well, I don't know. Council member 2014 to 2017. I'm not sure it goes back any earlier than
Yeah,
that
it's
for your
probably,
BBA
yeah. I
involvement.
don't know if it's on there, but it must have been at least 15 or so more years ago, and it's it's been a while. But what I say to a lot of my younger colleagues, as well as younger members, is that being involved with BBA is very, it's worthwhile. If you want an opportunity to learn how to lead, if you want an opportunity to learn, to network, just to get to know your colleagues, your community of lawyers, the Boston Bar Association is a fantastic place to get involved, right? And I think the programs that the association puts on, the opportunity to network, it creates this environment where it creates excitement for our younger lawyers.
You became vice president of the Boston Bar Association in 2020. So at that point, we were already in the pandemic because that would have, your term technically would have begun, I think, on September 1st, 2020. What
Yes,
was uh, what was that like? I mean, I think you were an officer the year that the pandemic hit as well.
I was. Yeah.
What was it like to be that involved with the bar association when everything shut down?
Yeah, and I think that like most people, right? The organization was looking to figure out a way to maintain that engagement with our members, right? If you can imagine, with all the programming being live, and then all of a sudden everyone needs to be sitting at home. The technology is just coming on board with Zoom and some of the other, platform that's available. And so I think that trying to figure out a way to carry on meetings, whether they're council meetings or
Right.
whether they're executive committee meetings or section meetings, right? And then having the programs without really disrupting and making it so that the membership feel like somehow they're disengaged because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I thought that was important for us to figure out a way to do so. And I think that the BBA, the staff, Rich, Page, the executive director of the Boston Bar Association, did an amazing job. We were able to pivot fairly quickly
Yeah.
from
Good.
mostly live programs to essentially virtual programs. But I would say that although we were able to engage more often, right, because it was a lot easier to get on Zoom, it made it hard though to kind of get to know your colleague, your council members, your officers in a more in-depth level.
Sure.
Before you may remember, before each executive committee meeting or council meeting, right? We would show up early, we would chit chat, we get to know one another. There's
Yeah.
that opportunity.
And there were a lot of social events
Yeah,
too at the Boston
yeah.
Bar
Right, but
Association.
on Zoom, people just go from one event or one call to the next, and so it really didn't provide an opportunity or an environment to get to know your colleagues well, and so
Yeah.
that was a challenge, right? And I think coming out of the pandemic, for my year, I think that we were coming out of the pandemic, and I think really for me now, it's really okay. We want to go back to mainly live events. How can we now encourage our members from attending live events because they're now so used to doing virtual events, right? And it's so
But isn't
easy.
there also a lot of pent up demand? I mean, a lot of people who are tired of being home and virtual
Yes,
who.
but
Uh,
but but what I think was interesting, Don, is that those pent up demand are usually helpful when we put on events with a networking component, right?
right.
People want to get together, they want to network, they want to see colleagues who they haven't seen for a while. But for the usual committee meetings or what have you, people
Yeah.
are more interested in doing that virtually, right? Because it's a lot easier.
Okay.
They don't want to have to
That's the
drive.
business side of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 They don't want to have to drive into town to do that. But so
Yeah.
we're trying to find that balance right now, right? So I think that's one of the challenges that we're seeing as we're trying to get back into live events, and we've been reaching out to the section co-chairs to get their input as well to see what's been working well within their particular sections and what's not been working as well, right? And so hopefully we have 6 more months and see if we can come up with a strategy that will work. And really for this year in particular, going back to your question, Don, about what is my theme, what is my pet project for this year. um, for me, if you've been listening to my responses throughout this podcast, there's really a focus on helping young lawyers or law students being successful, right? And so interestingly, that's my focus for this year. If you look at it, right, the class of 2019 started perhaps couple of months, 3, 4 months, and then the pandemic hit,
Right.
right? And now that we're out of the pandemic, it's
More or
2023.
less.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's the
they're
disease is still there. It's just not
yeah they
there
are,
the same way anymore.
but they're fourth year associates, or
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
fall they'll be fifth year associates, right? And for many of them, the runway to partnership is now only 3 years, 4 years, right? And
Yeah.
so what traditionally would take us, or give us the 7, 8, 9 years to accomplish is now been shortened to about essentially 3, 4 years for these
Yeah.
young attorneys. And so
Because just as the BBA has opened up in the past year,
yeah,
I don't know exactly when. That's when the law firms started opening up too. Really, not they haven't been reopened for all that long.
no, exactly.
Um,
Right. And
right.
and then I think that what we're hearing from a lot of the young lawyers is that they need the opportunity to be exposed to programs on business development, on networking, on all the soft skills, right? That's necessary to be successful because law school didn't teach them that. And I,
Right.
I don't think law firms they're doing that either as much. There may be some business development program in place here and there, but I think that there aren't too many opportunities like that. So I think that BBA recognizes that, and I want to make sure that we create a welcoming environment for a lot of these young lawyers, whether they're diverse candidates or not. I want them to look at BBA as an organization where they can reach out to, that they can utilize the resource, they can get involved with and be successful in whatever way that they envision their career to be. And I think that's important because they're our future, right? And
Right.
if we don't provide them with those opportunities, it's gonna be detrimental to the community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's exactly the this is exactly the right time to have that as a focus. It's not the first time the BBA president has focused on
I think
the plight
you
of young
focused on that
people.
during your presidency, right?
I did my year, and then some of what I was trying to accomplish, which we didn't really finish my year. I think another president, it might have been Lisa Arrowwood, kind of picked up and implemented some of the things that we had talked about. So yeah, every now and then it's important to do that, but especially my I was focused on that because we were just coming out of the Great Recession, and that had a huge impact on the job market. It had a huge impact on people's early
Mm.
careers. So I thought something like that was needed. You're in a very similar situation, but also very different in a worldwide pandemic and people having to begin the first 2 or 3 years of their career remote. That's just a hard thing to imagine.
Yeah,
You and I probably can't imagine what that was like. You wouldn't have wanted to start your career that way, and I wouldn't have either.
and it affected really a lot of the mental health of a lot of these young
Yeah.
attorneys and many attorneys, right? And I've come across many attorneys who's basically quit the practice of law because sitting at home alone, really with no interaction and working essentially, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. It can take a toll on you, on your mental health,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Now, Ching, let me ask you another question. I read somewhere in your one of your biographies, I think, that you are the first Asian American president of the Boston Bar Association, which I'm not sure I would have realized if I hadn't read it, and it probably surprised me a little bit because we've had so many strong Asian Americans in the Boston Bar for a long time. How has that affected your leadership? Do you have does it open some doors for you that other people didn't have open? Does it give you an impetus to try certain things that other people weren't trying? How does that has that had any impact at all on the nature of your presidency or what you do with it?
I think that being the first of anything is important, right? And being the first Asian president to the Boston Bar Association is important. But I think first and foremost, I need to do a good job. I need to make sure that the work that I do is in the best interests of the organization. Because if I don't do a good job, you can imagine what's going to happen, right?
Right.
I think it's important to be first, but also I need to do a good job at it. And then in terms of opening doors, I would say that there are opportunities that have been made available to me because of my role or my position. But for the most part, I think that what I find more rewarding, with respect to my role, is the opportunity to engage the community a lot more, right? In my capacity,
The community. What
just the
community?
community in general, right?
Okay.
Whether it's the legal community, whether it's the just the community in general. And then
Sure.
I think that what's interesting, I've been asked by the Black Pre-Law Association to come and speak. I've been asked by various affinity groups, like the Black Women's Law Association, to join in some of their programs,
Yeah.
which really allows me to kind of understand more some of the issues or some of the challenges that these communities may be facing. Opportunities that I may otherwise would not have had. And being a president who is in it's part of an affinity group, I think it makes it easier for the other affinity groups to reach out and get me involved with some of their events and
Sure.
programs. And I'm often I feel honored to be asked, and I try not to say no, right? Because I think it's important to be out there, to be seen, to get involved,
Yes.
and really set an example for some of the younger lawyers. It's like, yeah, this is a possibility for you guys, especially those are in the various affinity groups.
It's a possibility, and it's also very worthwhile,
Yeah, yeah,
worthy of their time too. One thing the BBA does, like other bar associations, I guess, is take a position on policy matters. Maybe, and I know recently, for example, it took a position or issued a release when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade in the Dobbs decision. What's that been like for you, being president? Well, I think some of that happened when you were still president elect.
yes, yes.
But what are some of the policy positions that the BBA has taken during your presidency? And what thoughts do you have about the role of a bar association and the BBA in particular in weighing in on
Yeah.
controversial national issues concerning the access to justice or equal rights, things like that?
Yeah, and you know this well, Don, is that BBA typically responds to a lot of different legal crises as they arise, right? But earlier this program year, with the Martha's Vineyard migrant situation,
Oh, yeah.
I actually was on Martha's Vineyard for a meeting, essentially the weekend that happened. and
Just by
Yeah, it's just
coincidence.
by coincidence. I think issues like that, where BBA is quick to respond, to take a position, to really invite those that are involved at the front line of those issues to come and really speak to the membership and to educate the members. I think that's important, right? And I think that for a lot of these policy issues, or the position that perhaps members are looking to BBA to take, I think that regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, I think what's important, I think that for BBA and for me, I think it's important for the members to know that we are there. We acknowledge what's going on. We're there to educate, whether it's the community, the membership, on the issues and how to and all the various ramification that come with these issues, and whether or not you agree with the position that we take or not. I hope that at least you understand that what we're doing reflects well, or the beliefs of the membership, and that we're there to help educate the membership and the community, right? So whether that's the Martha's Vineyard migrant situation, whether it's Dobbs, which we've set up a task force to address that, my guess is that a number of the Supreme Court decisions that's going to be coming down this year will
Yeah.
require BBA to take to take a position, or at least provide a
And
statement.
maybe
And
maybe the BBA has taken a
yeah,
position already on some of them, and
yes,
maybe even filed amicus briefs.
Yes, and
But I understand it. The BBA can't be a partisan organization or a political organization, but it is certainly part of its mission to promote access to
mhm.
justice. Um, I I know it's like a four-part mission. I don't know that I could quote all of it right now as I sit here, but
Yeah, no, no,
protecting constitutional rights and things like that.
yeah, no, I know what you were. I actually have it written down somewhere. I was going to try to, you know, work that in, but I don't think this is.
I have it. I have it from. So this is from the president's page,
Yeah.
February 9th, 2023. A little piece written by somebody named Chinh Pham.
Yes. Yes.
And it says the Boston Bar Association has a mission to advance the highest standards of excellence for the legal profession, facilitate access to justice, foster a diverse and inclusive professional community, and serve the community at large.
Well
So I
said.
assume that's the official.
Yes.
Yeah, I made that all up. No, I read that all from your piece. And it's a very important mission, and the BBA is very good at fulfilling it and attracts other people who share that perspective. So, and again, it's not a partisan thing. It's not a
Yeah.
Republican versus Democrat thing. And part of the enjoyment that I think some lawyers get at being at the Boston Bar Association is uh, encountering people that they disagree with and having productive conversations, all in the spirit of everybody wanting to just do the right thing, and even if they
Yeah.
don't agree on what the right thing is all the time.
No, I agree, and I think it's important for BBA to provide and maintain a platform where ideas can be exchanged, and that we can
Yeah.
still be, civil in terms of in terms of our discussion, right? And I think that's what impresses me the most, is that with our membership, our council and whatnot, is that we may differ in our, beliefs, our positions and whatnot, but I think that we're able to have a conversation, work things out, and work towards the best interests of the organization. And that's I
Right.
think that
And its members and the community at
yes,
large and the
absolutely.
judiciary. I mean, there's a lot of constituencies that you serve.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, so you're halfway through your term, and when it's over, uh, at the stroke of midnight on September 1st, um,
That's
and
right.
you look back on it, what do you hope you'll be able to conclude about the term you just served?
Wow. Well, I still have.
And I want to say, and you're probably going to say this too, but I'll just jump in. It's not just you. You're the president, but obviously there's a whole lot of people. You mentioned the staff. There's the council. There's the other officers. There's all the volunteers. There's a lot of people that um, support the work you're doing. So it's not a solo act, and I know you don't want people to think it is, but you do set the tone, and you are the leader. What do you hope people will think about the term you just concluded?
Yeah, in honesty, Don, I really haven't thought much about what's next yet, right? I'm still looking to accomplish a few more things in the remaining 6 months, right?
But what are you trying to
Yeah,
accomplish?
I actually just had a conversation with the executive director of the Boston Bar Association a couple of days ago, just going over the goals for the remaining 6 months. I just thought that, hey,
Oh,
look,
good.
I've reached my 6 months, but I want to make sure that the remaining 6 months will continue to be successful. So we talked
Yeah.
about some of the things that some of the challenges, some of the things that I'm looking to accomplish. Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun, but I'm hoping that some of the things I have in mind will be successful, right? But if you think about it, Don, is that a year in this role really doesn't allow for that much time to carry
It's
out
it's it
much,
flies
right?
by. It's really
Yeah,
short, and you do sort of start a few months
yeah.
before the term begins, but still, it's very short.
As you said, each president may have started a little bit early, and each has his or her own little theme or focus or pet project. But I think that we all understand that our role is very transitory, right? And the best that we can hope to do is to continue to steer the association in a direction that will, serve the best interest of the membership, and really to ensure that the organization will be successful, right? And for the membership for the years to come. So I don't, really envision, doing anything outrageous. But what I'm going to focus on, what I can say is really to help steer or maintain the path of the organization as it moves forward, right? And that encompasses a lot of things, and really, for me, as I'm looking at this, there's just too many things, and there's no one concrete theme. There may be DEI, maybe young lawyers, there may be section events, so on and so forth. But all of which add up to things that I need to do to ensure that we serve the best interests of the membership.
And there will be plenty of work still left when you're done,
Yeah.
for your successors. So yeah, it never ends. But Ching, it's really great to hear about all the good work you've been doing and all the time you commit to it. I know how time consuming it is. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I wish you all the success in the world, starting with the next 6 months as you continue your presidency of the Boston Bar Association, and then, of course, well beyond that, Ching. So thank you very much for being on the Higher Callings.
Well, thank you, Don, for the invitation, and look forward to seeing you at a future BBA event.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ching. Take care. Bye-bye.
This has been an episode of Higher Callings. Your host is Donald Federico. Music is provided by Fancy Mountain, and our logo was designed by Matt Pedro. The associate producer is Brian Federico. Higher Callings is a production of Federico Media, LLC.